I have a YouTube channel. A YouTube channel with 2 million subscribers. Huh? Aardvark Warriors. And I have another one called Aardvark Widows and another one called Aardvark.
Yeah.
Should we start a new divider?
No, I'll tell you in a second. All right. So let me just give you sort of this overview. So we are still in the same unit. So if you remember, this unit is cells, and we sort of broke it into 3 sections. In our first section, we talked about microscopes. In the second section, we talked about cells and cell organelles. Now we're moving on. This is the last section, so we're still in the cells unit, and we're talking about what we call cell processes. These are things that happen inside of cells or regarding cells, and they're important things that we have to know about. So the processes we're going to talk about in this section are osmosis and diffusion, photosynthesis and respiration. We'll spend this week and next week talking about the first 2, and then probably the week after talking about the second 2. Okay, so that's sort of where we're going. Then we'll be done with the unit. So to start today, we're going to talk about some just sort of general stuff that you're probably already familiar with. Because when we talk about osmosis and diffusion, we have to understand concentration. And so we'll spend some time doing that today. So we have some Kool-Aid here. We have 2 glasses of Kool-Aid, A and B. Obviously they're different. Which one has a higher concentration of Kool-Aid? Nick?
B.
Yeah. Sample B has a higher concentration of Kool-Aid. Maybe that's 20% Kool-Aid, 80% water, something like that. All right, which would have a higher concentration of water? Anna?
A.
Yeah, A would. A would probably be maybe 5% Kool-Aid, 95% water. So that would have a much higher concentration of water. So if we're to think about what it might look like, if we were to see the actual Kool-Aid molecules inside of the liquid, they have the same amount of liquid. You can see the cups are about equally filled. But A, would have fewer Kool-Aid molecules dissolved. B would have more. Yeah. All right, so we have some terms we should know. And I know you guys learned this because you guys told, other classes told you. Dilute is a word you had to learn back when you were doing this unit in 5th grade. What does it mean?
It's like, make it less flavor.
Yeah, how would you do that?
Watery.
How would you do that?
Pour more water.
Yeah, you can add more water. Adding more water to a solution dilutes it, or makes it more dilute. The next phase of the all right, so when we talk about a solution, what is a solution? John?
What the solvent and the solute make.
Yeah, those are 2 important words. A solution is made of 2 parts, the solute and the solvent. The solute is the thing that sort of gets dissolved, the thing that seems to disappear. And the solvent is the material that holds it, that does the dissolving. Now for our purposes, the solvent is almost always going to be what?
Water.
Water. But other things can dissolve substances, but we're going to use water for most of our examples. So if you think about making a pitcher of Kool-Aid, what's the solute when you're doing that? You're making some Kool-Aid at home. What's the solute? Raise your hand. Chris?
Kool-Aid powder.
Yeah, the powder of the Kool-Aid. And what's the solvent? Sydney?
Water.
Yeah, water. Now Kool-Aid comes in 2 versions. You can buy those little packets, little envelopes of Kool-Aid. What are they missing?
Water.
The sugar. They don't have the sugar there. You have to add the packet, then you add like a ton of sugar to it. If you buy in a canister, that has the sugar already mixed in. So you get the two versions. All right, let's look at some examples. If we think about some water with these O's symbolizing some molecule. In this case, the solute are the O's and the solvent is water. So if we have sample A and sample B, which has a higher concentration of O's? Maggie? Yeah, sample B does. How about which has a higher concentration of water? Rachel? Yeah, sample A. Again, you can think about it as percentages. This is maybe 50% O's, 50% water. This is maybe 25% O's, 75% water. Here I have some salt molecules picture, taking salt water. In that case, what is the solute in salt water?
Salt.
Anna?
Salt.
Yeah, salt. What's the solvent in that salt water? Raise your hand. Okay?
Water.
Yeah, water is a solvent. Which has a higher concentration of the salt molecules? Anna?
Sample A.
Sample A does. Which has higher concentration of water? Sydney?
B.
Sample B.
These are two.
All right, well, let's look at something that's slightly different. Now we have glucose, which is a type of sugar, again, being dissolved in water. All right, in this case, what's the solute? Raise your hand, please. Solute. Jack?
Glucose.
The glucose. What's the solvents? Jacob, what's the solvent?
The solvent. Water.
Yeah, it's water. All right, now which has a higher concentration of glucose? Maggie? Okay, but don't they, are they equal, Jill? No. So they have the same what?
Glucose. Same glucose.
Same
level
amount
of glucose.
of glucose, correct?
Yeah.
Yes, they each have 6 molecules of glucose.
But different.
But you're right, Maggie, so why?
Because the milliliters of water is different, and sample B has like less.
Yes. Sample B has less water, so if you think about it in percentages, it has a higher percentage of glucose. Sample,
Wait, what happened with the first
I
one?
don't know, there it is. Yeah, sample B had a higher concentration of glucose, sample A had a higher concentration of water. It's the same amount of glucose, but it's different amounts of water. It's like what I did in the beginning of class with the salt. I had the same amount of salt, but I had 2 different amounts of the solvent, which was water. So concentration depends on the amount of solute and the amount of solvent. And by changing either one, you change the concentration of the solution. So why are we talking about all this? That's probably a question you never thought about. Why is all this about concentration in solutions if we're really in the cells unit? Well, cell membrane itself is very important. You know, the cell membrane is the outer thin layer surrounding the cell, and part of what it does is allows things in and out. And the concentration of its substance is one thing that determines whether or not it goes through the cell membrane. Okay?
You know how the disease gets in your cell and that makes it sick? But like if you put salt in water cells, would the salt get into the water cell?
Water doesn't have cells.
Yeah, wait, no, I mean like, it's not living things.
Like living things
No,
in the water?
No, yeah.
Yeah, well,
Like can it
Bacteria.
get in,
not really.
like bacteria can get in. Like,
We'll talk about this, because like gargling with salt water helps the sore throat feel better.
Yeah.
Again, it's helping to damage some of those bacteria cells, and we'll talk about why. We will talk about that next week. All right, so when we think about the cell membrane, or any membrane, We say that it can be impermeable to a substance, it can be permeable to a substance, or the membrane is semi-permeable. Does anyone have any idea what any of those words might mean? Permeable? Sydney?
Like, affected?
Not quite affected. Permeable. Impermeable means things cannot get through. A substance cannot pass through if the membrane is impermeable to that substance. So you can probably guess what permeable means.
Immune?
Can pass.
Yeah, that it can pass through, can freely pass through. So if a membrane is permeable to glucose, it means glucose can go through it. If it's impermeable to starch, it means starch cannot go through it. Most membranes are something we call semi-permeable. What do you think that means? Yes?
You might be able to.
Yeah, that some things are able to pass through, other things are not able to pass through. It depends on what substance it is. When we look at the cell membrane, it's pretty complicated. It's kind of, I know when we drew it in the cell, it was just like a simple line around the cell, but really it's a double layer. It's called a phospholipid bilayer.
What's a carbohydrate chain?
This is the inside of the cell, this is the outside of the cell. And so some things can just sort of squeeze right through this phospholipid and get into the cell. Other things have to go through sort of a tunnel to get there. Okay? These carbohydrate tails, they help to identify cells and so on. But small molecules can just get right through the membrane. So if we think about this as the membrane, the bilayer, some molecules just slide right through. Things like water, carbon dioxide, oxygen. Small molecules can squeeze right through, no problem. Other molecules that are larger, they can't just squeeze through like that. They need another way to get through. It's kind of like if you are, when you're a kid, you at the beach, you got that little sand toys, you know, the little pail, the little shovel, then the strainer thing.
Yeah.
You pick up a bucket full of sand, you pour it in the strainer. What goes through?
Say water.
Water,
Some sand.
the sand. What doesn't?
The rocks and shells.
Right. Why does sand and water go through but not the rocks?
So it's tinier.
Yeah, it's the size of the particle. Small particles can get through, larger particles cannot. It's similar with the cell membrane. Small molecules like oxygen, water, carbon dioxide can just slide through, but larger molecules cannot. All right, let's think back to Kool-Aid again. So these glasses of Kool-Aid that you see, they have different concentrations of Kool-Aid. What does that mean? Concentration. Jacob?
More or less of the powder or the water.
Yeah, that's how we made different concentrations. But what does the word itself mean, concentration? That,
The amount of like sugar.
not quite. No, not quite. We can think of it as how strong the solution is. How strong the solution is. So if you were to taste these different glasses of Kool-Aid, obviously, this would be a much stronger Kool-Aid solution than this one. This one has a high concentration of what?
Water.
And a low concentration of
Sugar.
Kool-Aid. A low concentration of Kool-Aid, high concentration of water. And on the other side, what about this one? Dad?
High concentration of Kool-Aid and low concentration of water.
Yes, correct. So that has a high concentration of Kool-Aid and a low concentration of water. You know, this one is maybe 5% Kool-Aid, 95% water. This one is maybe 50% Kool-Aid, 50% water.
It's gotta be more than 50%.
I don't think so.
That's
What, the one on the
I
right?
would drink the one.
Most people, I would guess, drink this one.
Yeah, I
Or the one.
I drink the last
Yeah,
one.
That one?
I'll drink
the second to last. I drink that one.
I drink the last one.
Why would you drink it then?
Vein. I don't know.
All right.
The last one was seared stuff.
Our last slide here. So let's bring this back to what we actually need to talk about in this unit, and that's diffusion. So when we talk about diffusion, we're talking about the movement of molecules. And molecules are the building blocks of matter. They're these tiny little particles that make up all physical objects. And diffusion describes how molecules will move. Molecules are, now they don't think, they're just particles, but if they could think, we would say they don't like to be crowded together. Molecules don't want to be jammed into a very high concentration. If they can, they will spread out into a less crowded area, into an area of lower concentration. And diffusion is the movement of molecules from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. You can think about it like this. I could probably take every 7th grade student in our school and fit them into this room. We'd all be standing, it'd be very close and smelly. But anyway, they could fit in here. You guys probably wouldn't be very happy about that, but you could fit.
Yeah.
So let's say I did that. I forced every 7th grader into this room for a while, and then I opened up that door back there. What would probably happen?
People would run into it.
Would everybody go over there?
No. Half, like half.
Yeah, about half of you would probably go over there, and you'd have a little bit more space. You would go from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration, a crowded area to a less crowded area. Then after that, let's say I open up the door to Miss Bean's room. What would happen? Yeah, again, you would probably spread out equally so everyone has a little bit more space. So that's a similar process happens with molecules. When they're in a tight, packed, crowded area, they would like to spread out to area where there's a lower concentration. Gio?
If everybody was in here, would that mean they could stand on the tables too, or around?
Yeah, probably. They could probably fit in this room just standing together. All right, so some examples. You know, each morning, Mr. Arcuri gets to school before me, and when he puts on his perfume, he does it in my room in that corner over there. And so when he sprays that little perfume bottle, those perfume molecules start off in a little cluster way over there in the corner. But those molecules diffuse. They spread out, and they eventually make their way throughout the whole room. And when I come in the morning, I can smell that as soon as I walk in the door. If I put a drop of this dye in water,
Oh, that's why it was blue.
okay? Again, the dye starts off in a small little clustered area at a high concentration. But those molecules don't want to stay there. What do they want to do?
Spread out.
Spread out. And so in a minute or two, when you look at this, you will see those dye molecules have spread throughout the whole container of water. That's what diffusion
It's like
is.
an upside down tree.
Molecules will move from areas of high concentration to areas of low concentration. Yeah. Same is true, this is very important even in how our bodies work. When I breathe in, when you breathe into your lungs, and you inflate your lungs, the air that you inhale, tell me about its concentration of oxygen. It has a high concentration of oxygen, higher than your blood. So what do those, when you breathe and inflate your lungs with oxygen and air, what do those oxygen molecules want to do? Yeah, where are they going to spread out to?
Into the lungs.
Into your blood. And that's how oxygen gets in your blood. And the blood around your lungs has a high concentration of carbon dioxide. And so carbon dioxide diffuses out of your blood into the air of your lungs, and then you exhale it. Right? Again, all these examples work this process of diffusion. Any questions about that? All right, we're gonna stop there for today.
Okay.